Now we're moving up to chapter 4. This is the next step in the cycle here. We finished the listing consultation. Now we're moving on to servicing and marketing. And again, I wish I could hear you. I'm going to have to figure out what happened when I reset my computer. But just put in the chat, what's the purpose? What do you want to have happen? Once you take this listing, what would define a great outcome? What are you looking to achieve? Anybody? Give you a second to type that in. I mean, we certainly have a goal. We're trying to get something done. A sold property, right? Right. We want to get this property sold. We want to get it done for as much money as possible with as little aggravation as possible. That's really what we're looking for. But I'm going to tell you that there's got to be more to it than that. Part of what we have to do when we're marketing a home is not just achieve a great outcome for the seller. That's our job as a fiduciary. We're going to talk about that in a second. But we got to create more business for ourselves. The marketing of these listings has to bring more business into our universe, or it's just not doing all the heavy lifting that it needs to do. So servicing and marketing has two goals. Get the home sold, get it sold quickly, get it sold for top dollars with as little aggravation as possible, and bring more business into my pipeline. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to think about both of those things today. So for starters, I'd give you a little Gary Keller quote here right out of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent. He says that virtually every top producing agent we have ever worked with has a deep sense and an almost inherent sense of service. They have a servant's heart and a place. They place their buyers and sellers' real estate experiences above all else. Above all, they're very, very service oriented. And I think, you know, as realtors, as real estate professionals, we get that. We would agree with that. But how do we operationalize that? How do we make that real? So it's not just lip service. It's real service focus. How do we do that? So a couple of things we want to think about. 3 different levels of service, right? Level number 1, we're going to call sort of a purpose. People who have a great service business, they have a real clear purpose. They understand what it is they're trying to accomplish and why people should work with you. Simon Sinek, who some of you may know the name, he's a great author, and he wrote the book Start With Why. And if you haven't seen that book or you're not familiar with it, what his premise is that people don't really choose products and services necessarily based on what you do. They are drawn to it really because of an underlying drive of why. Why are you doing it? Think about Apple products for a minute. In the early days, you know, when Apple was breaking in with its iPod and its all the iPhones and all that sort of stuff, the mantra of Apple wasn't have these really cool products and do things that are really fun that nobody else can provide for you. The mantra was think different, break the rules, right? Do you remember some of those early commercials with Jimi Hendrix and Albert Einstein? And the idea was, if you buy Apple products, you're kind of an upstart. You're kind of somebody who's a rule breaker. You're kind of different from everybody else. And people were attracted to Apple because that's kind of how they envision themselves, right? To some extent, we've got to have some clarity for ourselves about why would somebody work with me? And that's kind of tied to your value proposition. Your value proposition is really clearly a set of services that you're going to provide and the value that you add. But your purpose is a little bit different. It's kind of your driving mission, right? What's in it for someone else is the purpose. How do you do it is the value proposition. And then last but not least, we go back to this idea of being a fiduciary. As a fiduciary, it's more than just a transactional relationship. One of the ways that we can represent buyers and sellers in the state of New Jersey is as a transaction broker. Very few brokerages provide that. We don't. Right? But a transaction broker is, hey, I'll put the deal together for you, but I'm not going to offer you any of the fiduciary responsibilities that come in hand with a real fiduciary relationship. And I think one of the things that's really important for us is for people to really get what that means for them. You know, we go back to what those are. We think about the acronym OLD CAR, at least that's the one that I learned when I was in school. Obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, right? How do I handle your money? And then our reasonable care, right? Am I doing everything that I can to constantly be gaining greater skills so that I can provide the best service to you at all times? How do we make that real so that folks understand that when they're working with you, they're not just getting somebody who's going to be a deal putter together, if that's a word, but I have some responsibility to you and it matters, right? But these are the three different levels here. Purpose, being clear about what your purpose is, what's the impact that you're trying to make, why should people align with you, your value proposition, how are you going to do it, the value of being a fiduciary. And then what we've got to remember is all of this has to be delivered in line with what they want. At the end of the day, they're consumers, and the consumers decide what's important to them, what they're willing to pay for, and what they're not. And so I just want to go back to the slide that we showed in session number 2, where we took a look at the National Association of Realtors surveys of buyers and sellers. And we took a look at what did they rank order as the most important things that they want us to be doing for them, right? And we're looking at the top 4 or 5. Help sellers market their home to potential buyers. Help the home get sold within a specific time frame. Help me price it competitively. Help me find ways to fix up the house so I can get more money. Help me find a buyer. These are the key things that when we're building out our service plan, right? When we're building out our service plan, these are the services that they want. And so that's not to say, right, that creating videos and virtual tours and things like that aren't part of what you're going to do. But what the consumer expects is that those kinds of things are just part and parcel with what a great realtor does anyway. And so making sure that we're focused on the real key critical things here is really important in our service plans, right? I'm keeping an eye on the chat since I can't hear anyone here. So we have, what do we want to get done? Sell the property as quickly as possible for the best price, for sure. Paul says, put the listing in front of as many qualified buyers as possible in the shortest period of time. That's what our goal is. Absolutely. It's all those things. And we're going to get to all those in just a minute here. There's a couple myths. There's one myth, though, that I want to dispel. And it's the myth that says, my clients only want to work with me. I'm the one that they want to work with. It's me that they're hiring. I'm the one who delivers the experience that they're seeking. That isn't really, really true. I mean, I think over time we develop relationships, especially with people in our database. And to some extent, those relationships can become personal and social, and we work, we do business with people who know us and like us. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to hiring you to perform a task, think about this for a second. If you had a child, God forbid, who needed a life-saving surgery, and you had a friend, a really good friend, who was a surgeon, would you automatically let your friend operate on your child, or would you go to the doctor that is the best in the area for the type of procedure that you want? When it matters, I suspect that you're probably going to go with the best doctor. Now, if it's your friend, great. But if it's not, you're going to just tell your friend, look, it's not personal, dude. I got to go to this other person. The truth is, our clients aren't as loyal to us specifically. What they're loyal to is this. They're loyal to the standards that we create. They're loyal to the outcomes that we can create and the standards that we represent. So we've got to be thinking about, how do we do this? How do we create a standard that they're loyal to? Because I may come and go. If my business grows to the point where I begin to develop a team, every member of the team has to be able to deliver the same standards, or people are going to be feeling like, I hired Hal and then I got passed off to Bobby. And so, that doesn't feel good. Well, if everyone has developed the same standards, that's what we're aiming for, right? That's what we're shooting for here. That's a myth. And I hear a lot of agents, and it limits their growth and it limits their life. Because what happens is, as their business grows, they find themselves running around in circles trying to do everything by themselves because they don't believe that anyone can do it as well. And as a result, they have a really crazy life. I don't want that for any of you guys, right? So let's talk about service standards. They're the yardstick that you're going to measure how well you're performing. How are you going to measure? What metrics will you look at to determine whether or not your service is excelling or not? I would ask you to unmute, but that's going to be a moot point today. Hold that thought for a second. I'm going to come to the question, what are the service standards that you have in your business, and how do you hold yourself accountable? Can anybody type in the chat box? I don't know how much of a real conversation we're going to be able to put together in chat right now, but can anybody type into the chat box some of the measurements, the standards and the measurements that you want to judge your business by? And to help you think about what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about standards in terms of response times. I'm thinking about standards in terms of outcomes. What are the key standards that you have in your business that you're going to hold yourself accountable to? Anybody have anything they can share on that? Give a few seconds for someone to type in the box. All right, I'll keep an eye on the chat box as I move along here because I don't see anything coming up yet. When you're building out a team, and I think some of you have been on teams or are currently on teams, you know, the responsibility of what we call the rainmaker, the name of the team, the one whose business sort of created the standard with which the team is sort of building itself around. A highly productive team takes as part of their standards, developing a real clear message, right? Developing a real clear set of standards, documenting what those are, and then training their team on how to deliver those, right? You know, where teams fall apart sometimes is where they just become a loose group of people collaborating together, and everybody does things the wrong way or their own way. And that is the wrong way when everybody does it themselves. A great team has a set of standards, and sometimes those are created collectively. Sometimes those are the team coming together saying, what do we want to hold ourselves accountable to? How are we going to set the bar and the standard? And sometimes they're created by the rainmaker of the team that says, this is what I've created. This is what it looks like. If you want to be on my team, we're going to teach you how to do it this way. But really important that teams have a clear set of standards and they do that training to maintain the highest level services possible. Let's talk about marketing. I'm looking at some standards here that popped up into the chat. Meeting the needs and requirements of my clients in a timely and quality-oriented way, right? And again, you know, Paul, what I would add to that is I would just kind of add some real specifics because that's a great standard. How are we going to define timely? Is there a measurement that we can look at to say, what does timely look like? All calls are returned within X number of minutes. How does that look, right? Because then you really have the ability to measure, did I achieve it or didn't I achieve it, right? Another thing, quick, responsive, responsible, transparent. Julia's saying 2 minutes in terms of the response time. Yeah, you know, a lot of the research is telling us that if we don't respond within 3 to 5 minutes, the odds are that we've, you know, people are feeling like we've let them down. Now, how do you engineer that? You know, I think one of the things we really have to do is rely to some extent on automated responses. We have to rely a little bit on the answering machine giving the message that says, hey, if you got this message, understand that I'll be checking it at 2 o'clock this afternoon and returning calls. Because in real time, we can't answer every response immediately. You know, sometimes we're with other clients and there's nothing that makes a client crazier than you taking a phone call in their presence. There's nothing that feels more disrespectful, right? But from a marketing standpoint, what we have to remember is we're marketing our brand to grow our business and we're marketing our listings, right? So highly productive agents find creative ways to do both. And there's this adage that we talk about sometimes called the 5 Ps of marketing. And any of you who are my bold graduates probably know what the 5 Ps are. What most agents do from a marketing standpoint is P number 1, I put your listing in the MLS. P number 2 is I put a sign on the front lawn. Who remembers what P number 3 is? Who can type it into chat for me? There it is. Michelle's got it. I pray like hell that somebody has a buyer and they bring him over so we can get this puppy sold, right? You know, prayer is not a business plan. You know, I was talking to one of the clients that I coached yesterday in my other coaching business, and they are trying to make a purchase and they insist on putting in an offer that is significantly lower than the market would expect. In a market that's competitive, there are multiple bids all the time. They're coming in below asking price, knowing that there's 10 and 15 offers on the table. And their stand is, I believe in God and God will provide. Look, okay, right? But most agents do the 3 Ps. They put it in the MLS. They put it on put a sign in the ground. They pray like heck. What we're going to do is this. We're going to do the 5 Ps. P number 5 is I prospect. I'm out there every single day. I'm looking for business for you. I'm not just hoping that I can attract it through my marketing. Yeah, my marketing is going to be important, but I'm also going to go out there and shake the trees. I'm going to be talking to people who are for sale by owners to see where are they going when they move, because conceivably they're not selling their house on their own to become homeless and live under a bridge. They need to live somewhere else. Perhaps they would be good candidates for my listings, right? Where else would I go? I'm going to prospect. I'm going to go and shake the trees a little bit. And P number 5, it's price watch, right? Once we've come up with a price in our consultation, we come up with a price that we think is going to be a good one, and we put it on the market. What may happen is that folks who are already on the market say, here's more competition. And quite honestly, they're just as good as we are, and we're priced higher than they are. So I'm going to have to reduce my price to get lower than them so that we're the better deal in the marketplace. I got to keep watching for that, because the moment that I go on the market, if somebody comes on the market who's as good or better than we are for less money, I got to correct, right? But the 5 Ps of marketing is something that I just like to talk about, because it's something that I think we really need to be focusing on. The research shows, this comes right out of the MREA, and I double checked it this afternoon. It is right on page 149. The research shows that if your lead generation program consistently delivers seller listings, you can count on the marketing to put you in the pathway of enough buyer leads to generate the rest of your business plan. What we know is that typically a healthy real estate business tracks about 50-50. We generate the listing leads. The marketing of those leads brings us the buyers. Those buyers we convert at a significant enough rate that we can get all the transactions that we need. But we're really focusing on generating the listings. The research is real clear on that. So let's focus about marketing. There's 5 aspects. We're going to unpack each one. The marketing plan, the marketing message, and the different methods that you're going to use. The managing of your marketing budget. Staging, super critical. Pricing, super critical, right? These are all 5 aspects of marketing and getting this thing out there in such a way that we can create what I call exposure and urgency. Part number 1. The first part of your marketing plan is recognizing that we're not selling homes in a retail-like environment. We're selling homes in a bidder's market. And in a bidder's market, we have to incentivize people to take the step of making the bid. And if we do a great job of doing that, we're going to have more than 1 people in the room. And when we have multiple people bidding, you guys are seeing it every day right now. Our market is dumb. It's just totally out of control right now. And it's driven by buyer emotion. And it's not sustainable. It'll come back down to reality at some point. But our goal in marketing a home is to leverage both of those things. If we want to think about this as a bidding market, I got to get people into the auction room, if you will. How am I going to get as many people into this space as possible to see what we've got, and then create a real emotion around that so that they have this sense of urgency that says, oh my God, I got to get this one. And we're going to try to leverage the fear of loss. I got to get this one before somebody else does. And so everything that we look at in terms of our marketing plan, and many of us have outlined a 11-step, a 17-step, a 99-step. I don't care how many steps your plan is. This is what I do first. This is what I do second. Everything should be filtered against, is this action creating more exposure? If it's not creating exposure, is it creating more urgency? If it's not doing either one of those, do I really need it? And my suspicion is that there's probably in certain folks' marketing plans, things that we're doing that maybe don't really create as much exposure or urgency as we think they do, that could possibly be swapped out for something else. But that's the thing we want to measure everything against. How am I doing this? How well is my marketing plan doing those things? So let's look at exposure. One of the different ways that we can create exposure is through signage. Having great signs, and lots of signs, right? and having your signs be clean and not rusty and not falling down. There's a house around the corner from me, and it's a beautiful home, and it is, it's. I think the folks who live there have been out of that house for a while. I think it's empty right now, but there's a sign out in front of it with a real estate company, a big brand name. I won't say who it is. And it's a post sign, and the sign has been hanging on just one screw. So it hangs at like a 45-degree angle. And I thought about going over there and just trying to get some ties and tie it back up. But the message about your brand, when people see that, is sloppy, not paying attention to detail, right? What do your signs look like? And they're going to create exposure, but they're going to communicate something about your brand as well, right? Open house directionals to the extent when we can use them, when towns allow us to use those. I think that the benefit of having lots of those is that the message that it says about your brand is you're everywhere. When I worked for my previous broker who spent a lot of time researching open houses, and they collected a lot of data around it, what we found was the best number of directional signs to put out for your Sunday open house is 10.
Wow.
Because with 10 directional signs, you'll be able to bring people in from lots of different areas. With 10 directional signs, you create the impression when you're driving around town that you, the agent, is everywhere. And that's part of what you're trying to do to market your brand, create that sense of omnipresence. So signage is one thing. Online distribution, lots and lots of different channels, right? We can put it on, whatever list hub and push it out. We can put it into KWLS and push it out into hundreds and hundreds of online sources, online social media, right? We can put our stuff on Facebook and Instagram. I'm not a huge fan, guys, of advertising our open houses and things like that on our social platforms. And what I mean by that is on any given Sunday morning, I have real estate friends all over the country, and between probably 8 o'clock Eastern till probably 5 o'clock, I get invited to open houses all over the country. And, I don't think that serious buyers, when they're really serious about looking at inventory, are going to go to your Facebook feed to see if you're doing an open house that day. They're going to go to some of those other online channels. I think social media, though, can be a place where you can advertise with targeted ads, especially through our Facebook ad campaigns, to learn more about this property, click here, capture their contact information, and then do that. But just putting it in your feed, probably not so much. What does go into your feed really well, though, is advertising your brand, showing you possibly, taking part in an open house, maybe going Facebook Live and walking through the house so they can see you being in the business of real estate. I think that is something that can advertise your brand really well. But think about how to use social media, mailers, public open houses, realtor open houses, target marketing to the public, right? And by target marketing, what we're referring to is really thinking about who the end buyer profile will be. Is this a home that is suited for first-time home buyers? Is this a home that's a better home for step-up buyers? Is this a home that is particularly good for commuters or whatever? Based on the nature of the home and its location and the amenities that it has, we think backwards to who would be the likely buyer and then specifically target our marketing to hit just that group. I go back to Facebook ads for a second. We used to be able to do that pretty effectively on Facebook. But now with about a year ago, I guess, there was a big lawsuit involving HUD that was alleging that realtors were sort of discriminating in their advertising based on protected class advertising. I'm looking for families with children or something like that, which is a protected class. So we can't do it quite the same way. I will tell you, though, that your print vendors can do that. They're not subject to that lawsuit. You can go to Prism Digital, right? Those of you in Ridgewood have Billy right on site there. You can go to Prism and you can sit down with them and say, this is the profile of the buyer that I'm looking for that I think would be a good buyer for this house. And they can start to go through their databases and start to narrow down, okay, let's look for everybody in the zip code. And then let's look for people of about this age. Let's look for people that have a home income of about this much so that they could afford this house. Let's look at people perhaps that have children of school age years if schools are really important in that neighborhood. And we start to narrow down that list and whittle down this list. And now we have the list which we can send our emails to, or our direct mails to, that kind of targeted advertising and that targeted marketing is really powerful, right? Target market ads to buyer's agents. Who do I know that controls the inventory? If I know that Cynthia Mitchell is the #1 buyer's agent in town, and I believe that she probably is because she's a rock star, then here's what's going to happen. I'm going to make sure that when I take a listing in town that I specifically market it to her because she's the gatekeeper on a lot of buyers. So I'm going to make sure that I target buyer's agents. Target market into your database, right? Thinking about who in your database either would be that end user themselves or might know someone, right? What else? Put in chat. What else would you do from an exposure standpoint in terms of getting the word out? What other strategies have you used or seen used that we haven't talked about that might bear worth a conversation for a second? Anybody? I'll keep an eye on chat. Reverse prospecting. Oh yeah, for sure. Right. That's right out of the MLS, right, Michelle? You can go to the MLS and you can reverse prospect on what people have been searching for. I love that feature. We didn't have that one when I was more actively selling. I wish we did, man. That would have been awesome. Right. All right. Let's take a look at part number 2, messaging and method. The message is, what are we saying? The method is how and where do you say it? And what we want to make sure of is that the message and the method are in sync. If I'm looking for a first-time home buyer, if I'm looking for someone of the millennial demographic, what would be some of the channels that you would use, marketing channels, where you think you're going to find them, where you think they're going to come across your message because they're on that channel? Where would you go if you're looking for a millennial? Anybody? I'm sure that something's going to pop right up in chat in just a second. Social media, any particular channels in social media, Lourdes? Where do you think the millennials would be? TikTok, says Michelle. Yeah, my daughter's a TikToker. She says, you know, she's not sure if she's going to be able to be a TikToker much longer, but that would be one place where they would go. Now, flip side of the coin, if you're looking for a downsizer, you know, someone in their, you know, 60s or 70s or whatever, TikTok probably ain't the place you're going to go, right? You're going to go other places. You might not even spend as much time on social, although Facebook could be a good place. The point is, understand your audience, understand what they pay attention to, understand what media channels they're going to be tuned into, and get yourself in front of those, right? Now what you say is important. And you know, the message that you put out there, to attract prospective buyers and sellers is really everything, right? This is Gary Keller 101. What would they want to contact you for? What would they get if they did? Why you, right? What is that specific value proposition that's bestowed upon them if they take that action step and reach out to you? Those 2 questions are at the heart of everything in your messaging. There must be a call to action, and it must be a call to action that resonates with the receiver. Otherwise, they're not going to act. Right? It has to be in line. I see Instagram, another place Sandy says that you would go to for that millennial buyer. That's true. I think you'd go to Instagram for a lot of buyers too, not just millennials. Ad copy. I want to talk about this for a second. You guys know I'm a bit of a neurolinguistic guy, a bit of a wordsmith. I think what we're talking about here from an urgency standpoint, the creation of emotion that causes people to desire something and to take an action based on that emotion. The words that we use in our ad copy can really create that. And if we think about specifically what are the words in our messaging that we use to create emotion, that we use to kind of create sort of a sense that I can picture this place. We're going to talk about when we get to staging, and we started to talk about this the other day, the psychological phenomenon known as narrative transportation, sort of being pulled into a storyline and starting to have an emotional reaction to the plot of the story, even though you're not really there other than in your head, right? And so the language and the words that we use in our messaging can sometimes create visual things and descriptive and action-oriented language so that people can kind of picture themselves there. Let me give you an example. Let's talk about a swimming pool, right? Envision yourself sipping a cold drink and enjoying the warmth of a beautiful summer day as you lounge beside this custom pool. Does that create a different response, a different image then new custom Olympic sized pool installed in 2012, right? Descriptive language that just talks about the thing doesn't create emotion, but if you can invite people in your ad copy to picture yourself here, envision yourself here, those are words that I love to ask when I'm touring a home. Could you see yourself? Could you see yourself entertaining in this dining room? Could you see yourself cooking in this kitchen? I'm inviting you to project yourself into the space, look around and see how it feels, and decide if it feels good, right? So think about in your messaging, in your marketing ad copy, what specifically are you saying to create this kind of an emotional connection to the home? Don't just describe floors, new hardwood floors. Use descriptive words, gleaming hardwood floors. I don't know what you want to use, but the point is put a little thought into that. And there are people out there that you can hire. There are professional ad copy folks who you can hire in, these crowdsourced websites. I'm thinking of Fiverr and different places like that. But there are people who are really good at this. And if you're not, you can sub it out for just a few bucks and get really compelling ad copy that when people read it, they're like, oh my goodness, I have to do something. I've got to take an action. That's urgency, right? Great messaging should be distinctive, right? Great messaging should be interesting. I tried to find a couple of examples of some interesting messaging, and I don't know whether these are the ones that I would go with necessarily, but I'll give you some examples of some interesting messaging that I think is memorable, right? Don't get a divorce, just get a bigger house. That's Chris Clark, the real estate guy, right? I don't know if I'd go there. I remember an agent who worked for me years ago in Montclair and subsequently went out to start her own brokerage, also in that market, and has a phenomenal brokerage that she owns now. I remember in the very early days of her business when she was putting stuff on Craigslist. And back in the early days of Craigslist, where those ads were kind of the Wild West, I mean, she put in one time that said, does this tiny apartment make my butt look big? And I'm like, I don't know if I'd go there necessarily. But the point is, people remembered her, right? People remembered her through her wacky sense of humor. Selling your own home can be like removing your own appendix. Very painful. Again, decide what's consistent with the image and the brand that you are trying to create. I picked these two simply because they really are different and they're very distinctive. And I think sometimes the use of humor can work. Sometimes the use of humor can backfire. You have to know your audience. But I think you want to be mindful about these two things, right? Is it distinctive? Is it interesting, right? If it's neither of those two things, your messaging is just going to fall flat. All right, let's move on. Managing your marketing budget. You got to hold your money accountable. You got a couple of rules here is don't spend money until you have money. Hard to do in real estate because in the very beginning, you're spending so that you can create an opportunity to have money coming back your way. But to the degree you can, we want to play red light, green light with our money. We want to sort of play that game that says, all right, I'm going to make a calculated decision as to what I think I want to spend my money on. And I'm going to do it for a defined period of time. And I'm going to green light that spend. And then I'm going to put a red light on it. And I'm going to evaluate, what did spending this money do? Did it generate leads in the way that I hoped it would? Did it get me in front of opportunities the way that I hoped it would? If it did put me in front of opportunities, were they long-term opportunities? Were they short-term opportunities? I think one of the challenges that people have with online internet spend, especially with companies like Zillow and some of the others who you can spend a lot of money, is that a lot of the leads that are generated are super, super top of the funnel leads, meaning they're legitimate leads. They're real people, they're real contact information, but they're not really in the mode to do anything real estate wise for 18 months, 24 months, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is. I'm not opposed to filling my funnel with folks like that as long as I can continue to follow them over time. But I want to have some of my marketing bringing quicker opportunities to me as well. And so we have to have a systematic way of evaluating, what am I spending on? What does it do for me? Avoid spending time and money on messages and methods that aren't really becoming effective, right? They're not tracked for effectiveness. If you don't have a way of truly evaluating, if I spend money on this thing, do I get any response back? I would say hold off. I would say either figure out how you're going to measure it or don't spend it on that. There's just too much at risk, right? Which means that we've got to do probably part of the qualifying questions when we get new leads is we got to ask early on, how did you find us? What was the message that you responded to? And what you find is certain messages really start to become really resonant. Certain messages seem to really get a response. Some of you guys know my buddy Nick Baldwin from the internet, right? From Facebook, Lab Coat Agents, Command Your Conversion, all those groups that he runs. Also a Keller Williams agent, runs teams here in New Jersey, a team in Michigan where he currently lives now. He posted on Command Your Conversion last night a simple text message that he finds gets a huge response. And it's simply a message, especially for folks who are not responding, that they've responded to some sort of an ad. They clicked on a Facebook ad, they're in the pipeline, but they're not responding back. And I think his message was just simply a text that says, hey, I'm just curious as to what your timeline looks like to buy that next house. Is it a week? Is it a year, a month, whatever it is? And he gives a couple of different options. And what he says that invariably people respond to that one. And the only way he knows that is because he's tracking. And he's tracking and he's seeing which of these messages is getting the response. Michelle put it, I used it today and got response from, let me open up the chat box all the way so I can see it. I used it today, response from people I couldn't get on the phone or email. Do you use Nick's message?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. And look, you know what? Nick is doing well for himself. I'm really proud of him. But track, that's my point. I was talking to an agent just this week who's decided to invest in a sort of community-based, it's not a park bench, or a bus station ad, but it's an ad in a supermarket. And it's actually on a hand sanitizer machine as you walk into the supermarket, which in this day and age is probably a good spot to be because most people are going to be stopping by there. And what I said was, look, this isn't cheap. And so if you're going to do this, your hope is that it's going to create enough exposure of who you are that your other prospecting into that community will become more effective. But you've got to find a way of finding out, did people see you there? Because there's a lot of money invested there. And if it doesn't contribute to that conversion, then we're going to have to play red light. There's an agent friend of mine who does this as an exercise, and you decide whether it makes sense for you. But he puts all of his marketing spend on a business credit card that he got, right? Which is good from an accounting standpoint. It's easier to track at the end of the year. Where's your money going if you do all your business stuff on a single credit card? But what he told me he did is every single year, at the end of the year, December 31st, he cancels the credit card. I'm like, oh my God, why would you do that? You've got all these different recurring expenses. You got to go get a new credit card. You got to start it all over again. He says, look, what I want to do is I want to make sure that once a year, I stop the presses on every things that I spent money on and reevaluate. Is it worth continuing? If it is, I'm going to continue. If it's not, I'm going to take a look and see at what point can I stop doing this. If I'm going month to month, I'm going to stop right away. If I'm in a time-limited contract, I'm either going to find a way to get a corrective measure to fix this marketing, or I'm going to pull the plug at the first convenience. So, whether or not doing it that way, terminating your credit card is your thing, I don't know. But you've got to manage your marketing budget and keep in mind that the outer limits, according to the MREA, right, in the budget model right here, what we know is that your budget is about 9.5% of your GCI. If you have a $100,000 GCI plan, you've got about $9,500 to be your marketing budget. It's your lead generation and it's your marketing, right? We're marketing our brand. We're marketing our listings combined together. 9.5% of your total GCI is your budget. So be clear about that. And be clear about holding those dollars accountable to delivering some outcome or pull the plug, right? Number 4 in the marketing plan, staging and photography. This is the essence of creating urgency. We are visual people. People need to see it. And on the left-hand side, you're just seeing the response of a survey conducted by National Association of Realtors asking specifically buyer's agents, would your buyers pay more for a well-staged home or not? And it's interesting, 32% of the buyer's agents reported that their buyers would pay 1% to 5% more in their offer if it was well-staged. 16% of the buyer's agents said that their buyers would go 6% to 10% higher for a well-staged home. And 3% said that they would go as high as 11% to 15% more. than the same home that wasn't staged, right? And so we've got to make sure that we're building staging into our processes. If the things that sellers tell us they want are to get the home sold quickly, to get the home sold within a time frame, to get the most money, the way we're going to do that is to create urgency through staging. The goals is to put the best face on the home, to maximize the spaciousness of the home, to allow visitors to envision themselves in the home. That notion of narrative transportation that we touched on before in ad copy works really well here. I started to talk about that on Tuesday when I said that in my mind, the goal of staging is to create little scenes that people stumble across as they're walking through the home, where they can project themselves into taking part in the activity that that scene depicts and have a positive emotional reaction to it. I looked at a home recently online, and in the family room, the family had a table set up with a big puzzle, a big jigsaw puzzle right out on it. And some people would look at that and say, oh my God, you know, it would be cool to have a space in my house where I could kind of hang out with the kids on a rainy day and we could do a jigsaw puzzle together. We don't seem to get that kind of family time. This feels good. I like this place, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about, having little scenes like that we have throughout the house so that people can kind of have those kind of little emotional moments. So where would we stage? It's the performance art idea that I was talking about, right? It's the performance art. People go to a stage, and this is where it kind of clicked in my mind. People see a performance on a stage. Staging is performance art in Broadway. Staging is performance art in real estate sales. How do we create the scene for people to take part in? Now, where? Here is, again, from the National Association of Realtors, the most important rooms to focus on when you stage. Number one would be the living room. What are we doing to stage that living room? How are we creating, again, the ability for people to not only have it seem spacious and decluttered and depersonalized, but that we have invited people to envision themselves using that space in a way that's pleasing. Number two would be the kitchen. What are we doing to stage the kitchen, right? Making sure that everything is crystally squeaky clean for sure, right? Making sure that the countertops are uncluttered. But again, I think that the kitchen can be a place where you can get really, really interesting little staging props set up. Cookbooks left out on the table with grandma's molasses cookie recipe right there, with some measuring spoons and some spices left on the countertop. You'd never leave it that way in your home when you're living there. But you are going to leave it that way when you're staging the home for somebody to walk in and see that, right? Which makes a staged home hard to live in. And that's one of the challenges for sellers, is we've got to help sellers understand the importance of maintaining the staging. Number three would be the master bedroom, right? Michelle is asking a question in chat that says, would you include this slide in the pre-listing packet? You better believe I would. I'd include this slide. I would include the slide that talks about buyers paying more. And I would really make sure that we address in the pre-listing package staging very thoroughly, because I'm coming back to it in a listing consultation, right? In that part of the listing consultation, right after we've done the CMA, before we move on to mutual expectations, this is the place where if we want to talk about our marketing and show them, now that we've agreed upon this price, let me show you what we're going to do to make that price show up. And sure as shooting, staging is going to be part of it. Master bedroom, how do we stage it, right? How do we have it so that it looks, think, bed and breakfast, Innkeeper magazine, right? We kind of know the image of what we're looking for. It needs to be inviting. Sometimes people might put a tray table on the bed that has on it some props, and you can buy these props, these little scones that aren't real scones, but they look real, on a plate on the tray table with a cup of coffee and a newspaper. You could envision breakfast in bed. This looks like fun. I haven't done that in years. I would love this place, right? Number four, the dining room. How would we stage the dining room? We don't have to have the entire dining room table set, but some place settings would probably be appropriate. Maybe if we had a sideboard, some things on the sideboard that would indicate that perhaps we're having a meal or we're having company come over or things like that. Number five, the master bath. How do we make that inviting and spa-like? You know, making sure that all the soap scum is gone and all the little spots on the mirror are cleaned off, but that's not enough, right? How do we create some other senses in there and use all the senses when you're staging? It's not just what do you see? What am I hearing? What am I smelling, right? You can have a beautifully staged home that gets totally betrayed by bad smells. I had one time. I had a listing. It was a beautiful home. It was like a Pottery Barn catalog. It was a beautiful little cape. And the two folks who lived there were animal rescuers, and they had way too many animals living inside, and it smelled like animals. And so it looked great, but you walked in, it was like ick, right? You've got to make sure that all that stuff is in alignment. Other things to think about is virtual staging, right? If you don't have all the things that you need, guys, the companies that do virtual staging right now, some of them that we've had presenting during COVID times when they're talking about their Matterport tours, but a lot of these companies will do unbelievable staging virtually where they'll take things out, they'll add things in. It is so lifelike and unbelievable that it may be worth doing, especially if your home is vacant. You know, to get that space staged out. Some of these companies will work with builders, and if you give them the specs of the house and the size of the rooms, even if it's not constructed yet, they'll be able to construct that staging picture in a computerized environment and give you something that you can run with in your marketing. And I think consider that when you need to, right? And also the exterior of the home. Just like smells can betray you, so can the exterior of the house. If people, you know, you have great photography, you have great staging, you put it out there, your marketing looks like $1 million, and then people drive up to the house and the bushes are all overgrown and the grass hasn't been cut in years, or they walk up the walk and the concrete is cracked, or the steps have a loose handrail. All that stuff just unravels everything else that you did in creating urgency. What it screams is deferred maintenance. It screams, I'm so disappointed. And, you know, once that souffle is falls, it's really hard to get people excited again. So we've got to make sure that the exterior of the house is clean and it's neat. Do we need everybody to go out and put new siding on it, a new roof? Not necessarily, but it has to be able to not take away from what they're going to experience once they get inside. Finally, in the last part of our marketing is pricing. Because at the end of the day, if it's not priced where buyers care to look at it, it doesn't really matter how good it is, or how good it shows, or how well it's staged. If the price is totally crazy, buyers aren't going to spend the time. I have this image here of the father and the son, and the guy says, look, keep the bait close to the bottom, son. That's where the fish are. And dutifully, he's got his bait right at the bottom, and the only thing at the bottom is a boot, and the fish are way up here. We've got to get this bait to where the fish are going to take it. And so that means we have to know the market well enough to know. And I talked about right pricing last time. I'll get to that again. But this is the slide. This is the slide that I love here that really talks about price and condition in any market. The ones that are in the best condition at the lowest price are truly in the market. The ones in the worst condition and the highest price are out of the market. And in between is no man's land. I've got a great price, but it's a little bit tired. I've got a great home, but it's a little too pricey. This no man's land is the most dangerous place of all, because you're going to begin to get traffic, but people are going to take a look at what you have and compare it to the homes that are in the market and make the logical choice to say that that's more value. Now, in a market like we have right now, where everything is on fire and it's all driven by emotion, the amount of homes that are in the market really expands outward. A lot of homes are in the market because there's so much demand and there's so little inventory that if a buyer wants one, they may have to sacrifice and take one that's not as good in condition, or take one that's priced a little bit higher. But when the market is tighter and there's not as much demand, you have got to truly be right in this little sweet spot here. And so, you know, we talked about that in pricing before, but this is the thing we've got to make sure that our marketing really reflects that we are in the market as compared to its peers. The 5% pricing rule. Price is such a big proponent of your marketing plan. Remember that your list price is nothing other than a marketing tool. Can I put it out at a number that will cause the market to react? The goal is to try to get it to the market within 5% of where it finally sells. The studies again and again and again show at all price points, if you introduce the house within 5% of where it finally sells, your days on market in this price range, 300 to 500,000. This is the Otto study, thousands and thousands and thousands of New Jersey transactions. 23 days on market if you bring it into market within 5% of its final sale point. If you're over that, it's going to go all the way up to 74 days on market. List to sale retention goes from 98% to 91%. Real dollars lost. Average sale price in the right priced homes, 380. Average sale price in just a little bit off, 363. That's a net loss of 16,000 real dollars.
Yeah.
Simply by pricing it too high and losing the urgency of the market. And it's the same in the next price point, 5 to 750. 22 days on market versus 78, a net difference of $20,000 lost. And it's the same in the luxury market, 1 to 2 million. 21 days on market is the average in the $1 million to $2 million price range if it's priced at the point where the consumer sees value. And that is a real hard thing for some luxury agents to get their heads around, because they sometimes believe that this house is just so unique that it just needs the right buyer and we're going to have to wait and wait and wait. There are rare occasions where that's true, where the house just is super unique and it does really need that one lifetime buyer to find it. But for the most part, it's the same at this price point as well. 21 days on market versus 76, 100% of the asking price retained as opposed to 90%. Real money left on the table, $27,000 on average. We've got to make sure that these get priced right, because our job is to do two things: get it sold quickly for as much money and as least aggravation as possible, and market our brand. The thing at the end of the day that all of this leads to is a brand story narrative that we can craft in our marketing that says, when you hire me, you get your home sold faster for more money than when you hire other agents in the market. I'm not just saying that. Here's my statistical proof. And that's really, really the last part here, is making sure that we're in tune with that 5% rule. So adjust quickly if you're wrong. Don't wait 30 days. Don't wait 45 days. You put it on the market. You've got great staging. You've got great photography. You're going to know within 10 days. You're going to know within 7 days. You're going to see the initial reaction. And if you have the ability to do a little coming soon and kind of warm up the market a little bit before you go, I think that's true too. That's a great way to do it. Just adjust quickly and don't lose time. So that said, it is 2:00 on the dot. I would love somebody to put something in chat. Any takeaways today? Any ahas or things that jumped out at you today? I wish we could talk more. In the chat is the question from Lourdes: where is that data from? That data comes from Jeff Otto and his right pricing studies. He does those routinely. Every few years he updates that data. If you reach out to me after this call, send me an email to halbenz@kw.com. I will point you to where you can find that data. Okay? Anybody have some other takeaways? Any ahas before we start to wrap it up for today? Everything that we're doing in servicing and marketing is doing what we can to get the home sold quickly, growing our business, having great outcomes. And we know it's all about urgency and it's all about exposure. And everything that we need to do needs to be filtered by those two things, right? Sounds like a pricing is a science, not emotion. You know, Paul, it's an art. It's a little bit of science. We got data, but you got to be able to read the vibe of the market. And that's not something that's easily quantifiable. That's something you feel from being in the market. That's something you learn from watching how the market's responding and looking at the data and learning how to interpret it. But pricing really is an art. You know, that's why these automated, things that you have online with these estimates and all these automated calculators, they're better than they've ever been before. And I'll be honest with you, most of these automated calculators that are being used by these companies that are like Open Door and places like that are doing these automated valuations, they've got enough data now in the markets that they're in that they're just as accurate as the average agent. But they're nowhere near as accurate as an agent who really gets it. who's really in the market, who can really read the market well. Exposure and urgency. There's an aha, right? And Amika, I'm glad you got that one. That's the goal. All right, guys, we're going to park it here. Where we're going, let's talk about where we go next week. We're going to wrap this up next week, but I'm going to skip ahead on the slide to where we're going next. Offers and negotiations is Tuesday. And then at the end on Thursday, we're going to combine contract and close and post-closing systems. But offers and negotiations on Tuesday is going to be through the lens of how do we make sure that the offers that we're receiving protect our sellers? What are we looking for in a great offer? How do we try to manage the risk so that our sellers don't get tied to offers that end up collapsing? We're going to talk about all that stuff on Tuesday. And then on Thursday, we're going to finish it up with contract to close. So I hope you guys can come back.